Hey there, welcome back to How to Write Science Fiction That Doesn't Suck. Today, I wanted to talk about something that is known in fiction writing parlance as the mushy middle. You may or may not have heard of this term. Uh, it means, well, I'll give you an example. When I was in that position where I had given up on trying to get trad published, um, after I had an agent and couldn't get my first two books published, I I wrote a lot of different things. I started to write a lot of different things in the space between that point and the time when I self-published on Amazon in 2011, because that was like 10 years, 10 or 11 years. 11 years. So I started a lot of different stories, novels, and I had partial manuscripts that were about 20 or 30,000 words long, uh, filling my computer hard drive. But I could not get past what's called the mushy middle. What that means is you got a great idea for a story, you know how to start it, and then you have some concept of how you want to end it. But that leaves this big gap in the middle of probably 60 to 80,000 words, 40 to 60,000 words, let's say, for most novels. You have no idea what to put there. And they call it the mushy middle because everything's firm on both ends, but in the middle, it's kind of mushy. It's kind of muddy. It's hazy. You don't know what you're going to do. And I really can't say that I got over this problem until I started plotting, outlining. I found that the more you outline, the more complete you outline, the less likely you are to fall into the trap of the mushy middle. However, that leaves a lot of people who don't outline, who pants or discovery write, if you will. And that's harder for them to get over. And when I was pantsing, when I was discovery writing my first 6 books, getting through the mushy middle was tough. And what it involved for me, and this is for those of you who refuse to outline or don't want to, so this is your section, so listen up. What I did when I reached a point where I didn't know how to go forward, I would reread the first however 10, 20,000 words of the book that I had written. I reread them, do whatever editing or correction I felt was necessary along the way, until I built up momentum to get to the next scene. Just kept rereading. If it didn't work the first time, I would reread them again. And sometimes I would take a notebook and I would jot down ideas for the next part of the book. And that would help me to come up with like connective tissue, I guess you could say, between the beginning I already had and the ending I knew I wanted. I would try to come up with something that would push the character development and the story arc along. It was difficult. It was very difficult to get through the middle before I started outlining. Pretty much I had to get inside all the characters' heads, give them motivations. I would write that down too. I would do really, really complete character sketches when I couldn't think of anything else to write. I would reread the first part. I would come up with ideas, sometimes come up with little scenes that I could put in that section that would be cool, It would be like a theatrical almost. And doing that eventually, I got past the muddy middle. But like I've said before, those first 6 books that I wrote, aside from the first one, which took me like 5 years. Uh, they took like a year to over a year each to write. And the main reason for that was the mushy middle. As I got past the mushy middle, it felt like a stone rolling downhill, just gathering momentum until it couldn't be stopped. And I cannot describe to you, if you have not experienced it, what a relief it was to get to the end of those books. Not not a relief in, oh, I'm so glad this is over, but a relief in like, this is what I wanted. This is what I've been aiming for. This is what I wrote this book for, is to get to this point. It was an emotional experience. It's what I miss about not outlining, about pantsing, is the feeling of accomplishment when you got to that ending and you realize, hey, this is pretty good. I did okay in the middle and I got to this really cool ending. And I felt like I had moved a mountain to do that. And I understand why that's appealing, but it's really difficult. I don't think I could do it anymore, honestly. I've thought about, just for the heck of it, pantsing a book just for old time's sake. And it doesn't appeal to me anymore. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I have the patience to just sit there and stare at the screen and try to come up with ideas off the top of my head. Not when I know that I could write an outline that breaks it down into acts, that gives character arcs definition, that gives story arcs definition. So if you are a pantser, may God be with you. Good luck. That is my advice. Reread, build up momentum, edit as you go until you just can't not write something. Make detailed character sketches. And write down ideas for scenes that you can put in the middle that fit in with the rest of the plot. And that's the best I can do, because that's what I did. It has been, 6 years, 7 years, 7 years, I think, since I wrote a book that I did not have outlined. And I'm honestly forgetting how to do it. So I'm sorry, that's the best I can do for pantsers. Now for outliners. I know some people who outline a plot still get caught up in the muddy middle. And the reason I think they do is lack of detail, I guess is the best way to put it, in their outline. Because they still, even though they're outlining, they got a very detailed outline in the beginning because they're doing all the background data for this universe they're in, the world building. And the ending's very detailed because they have, a mental image, a movie scene of how they want the book to end. But in the middle, they sketch everything out, and it's, where it should be 2 or 3 paragraphs, it's a couple sentences, which leaves them, I don't want to say that they're being lazy, but it leaves them with kind of a sloppy, unformed middle, which is, mushy middle. It's the same thing. So your best weapon to avoid a mushy middle when you're outlining is very detailed outlines in the center of the book. It's difficult. I know it is, because you don't care about that section as much as you do the beginning and the end. But you have to do it. You have to come up with subplots. You have, if you're especially if you're writing a first-person POV novel and you need it to be, longer, like longer than 80,000 words or so, you're going to have to come up with subplots. Because if you just write the bare minimum plot, well, you can't expand that with other points of view. You can't expand that with the plots that involve different characters, because you're only seeing this through the eyes of the one character. So if you're writing it from first person point of view, you got to have subplots that tie into the main plot. They have to seem coherent. And that is tough. That's part of what makes the mushy middle for, especially for first person books. Third person is easier because everybody has their own adventure they're going through. You can skip from one character to another, have them going through things simultaneously. With the first person though, you've got to, if you're let me put it this way, if your story, for instance, I'll try to think of something. If your story is about a smuggler who gets caught up in a plot to pull off a terrorist attack on the government, and he's trying to get out of it, trying to stop it, trying not to get arrested. Well, if you just have him do the smuggling, get caught up in the plot, run from the people, then have the final battle, well, it's not going to be long enough. It's not going to be a complete story. You have to have people that he becomes involved in. You have to have a map of where he goes in your head so that you understand that this is part of this arc. And it has to be, it can't just be, oh, I'm going to wander to this town and I meet these interesting people and then I'm going to leave. Because that's amateurish. You have to mesh everything together. You have to have him, if he's running from the bad guys and the law, have him get captured by one or the other. Have him just barely get out of it. And when he gets captured, he meets somebody whose knowledge and connections mean something at the end of the book. That's the type of thing you have to do. And it gets more difficult with a first person point of view, which is inconvenient for me because I have more success and feel more comfortable writing first person point of view books. I don't know if you're like that. I know some people find it much easier to do third person. I've written both, and honestly, not to sound too mercenary, but when I write first person point of view books, they sell much better. Maybe that's because it's easier for me to get inside the head of my character when I'm writing from inside their head. I don't know. Maybe that's a weakness on my part, but yes, first person point of view is for me an easier task, I guess, to write from inside. Somebody said that way, but it's also more difficult to plot because everything is seen through their one set of eyes. So you can't jump back and forth. Something has got to happen that distracts the main character from their main goal to a secondary and tertiary goal. But you also can't have those goals be unrelated to the main goal. Somehow that has to tie together. For instance, if this guy who's smuggling takes shelter with a family of colonists, and then has to defend them from bad guys somehow. Well, that can't be the end of it. He says, "Thank you for giving me shelter," takes off. You don't hear anything again. No, this has to be related to the main plot somehow. The bad guys have to be related to the main bad guys. Something that happens with this family has to be related to the plot that he is attempting to foil, to overthrow the government or whatever. It has to be meshed together. And who's really good at that? He's really good at everything. But if you don't read urban fantasy, go read Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden Files novels. That's the last 2 or 3 I'm not really crazy about, like 4. But especially the first 10 or 11, maybe 10 to 12, read those novels, as many as you have time to read, and see how he meshes things together where something that seemingly is unrelated to the main plot is not actually unrelated. Jim Butcher is awesome at that. If you're more into epic fantasy, read his. Oh gosh, what was the name of that series? It was the one with the Roman Legion and the. I think it's something Fury. Jim Butcher. I'll look it up. Fury. It's the Codex Alera. Sorry, I know there are Furies involved, and it's the Codex Alera is the name of the series. I believe it's 4 books. I might be wrong. It's been a while since I read it. He's very good doing that in that series. Things that you did not think would be related, points that I don't think anybody would have put together. And he really did a great job of meshing together, just like he does in the Dresden Files. Okay. So we've gone over people who pants, you poor souls. People outline when write in first person POV, what you have to do to get past the middle, what you have to do to outline a story that's going to be complete enough and long enough to be an actual novel instead of a novella. Let's go to third person. Third person, like I said, it's easier because you can show each individual. If the main characters split up, you show each of their paths getting back to the main ending of the story that'll bring them all back together. But I also have to caution, they have to be related. If they go off and do something that seems totally unrelated and it never does mesh back into the rest of the novel, people are not going to like that. It's going to seem sloppy and amateurish. All the different paths that you take to get through that middle, all the stories you tell, they have to come back together. And that is the key to outlining. You have to come up with these stories for each of them. Then you have to figure out how they come back to the main story, how they come to that ending that you had in mind the whole time, that was your cinematic ending that made you want to write the book in the first place. Now, the other thing about the Mushy Middle, besides the plotting and mechanics of getting past it, is a saying that you need to remember. This, if nothing else I say sticks with you, remember this. If you found a section of the book boring to write, your readers are going to find it boring to read. Don't write something, because this is how I viewed things originally when I was originally started writing. Don't write something because you feel obligated to write it. Never write a scene because you feel obligated to write it. Because, oh, well, this scene's necessary. I read it in every book, so I'm going to have it here. For instance, my Recon series, the first Recon book, Recon Award of the Knife, the main character joins the Recon Marines. And it is a trope of many military science fiction books to have a basic training scene. I hate that basic training section, like that goes on forever, like half a book. Unfortunately, I hate those. Maybe you like them, and more power to you if you do. There's plenty of books that have that in it. I hate reading them. I like a little bit of basic training, then kind of skip to the end. I don't need to read about every single experience this character had going through basic. I don't need the first half of Full Metal Jacket replayed for me in a book set in the future. I know some people enjoy that, like I said, but I do not. And since I don't enjoy reading it, I'm not going to write it. You have to come up with something else that fills that section. Now, maybe your tastes are different than your readers, and that does happen. And you'll see that in the reviews. But that doesn't mean you have to write something you don't want to read. Screw it. Screw them. Not that you should just say screw my readers, but find readers that enjoy reading what you would like to write. Um, if you rate the rest of the book well written enough and the story good enough, nobody's going to care. I got positive reviews for Recon, A Ward of the Knife, and for Contact Front for not belaboring the boot camp or basic training sequences of those novels. I had people say, finally a novel where they don't give you every single bit of basic training. Now, it seems tempting to do that because that is something to fill that mushy middle that we were talking about. But that's my point. Don't write a scene because you feel obligated to write it. Only write scenes that you want to write, that excite you. Scenes that have impact, that have something to do with the main plot, that's going to contribute to the main plot. Don't write throwaway filler scenes. And if it seems throwaway or filler, but you have a plan to bring it into the main plot, that's different. But if it's something you don't want to write, and if you had your choice, you wouldn't put it in your story, then don't put it in your story. I know that seems like obvious, but you would be surprised how many people are like, oh, I'm writing this scene for this book and I don't like having to write it, but it has to be in there. I'm like, well, does it have to be in there? Because unless you enjoy writing it, unless it contributes to the plot, just skip it. It's not necessary to include every scene that you've read in other books. Your book may not be like those books. And unless you're writing like in somebody else's universe and they with somebody else's outline, and they have a like a set plot beat list that they want you to hit, then you don't have to do anything. It's your book. Do what feels right to you. Now, there are certain tropes that you have to hit in certain subgenres, and you'll hear about it if you don't, but don't feel obligated to write something that's boring to you. And if you feel like you have to write a scene in basic training or whatever, write the best one you can. Make it interesting. Don't write your cookie cutter basic training scene or whatever it is just because you feel like you have to. Okay, so we've gone over the mushy middle, and I feel like I've said as much as I can without repeating myself. I do not want to ramble on. Hope you guys are doing well this December. I'm excited. My kids are coming back for Christmas, so that's cool. I'm finishing up Gates of Eternity Book 3, and I have a short story that I want to finish before the end of the year as well. So I'm not pushing myself too incredibly hard. I should be through with Gates of Eternity in about 9 days, and then I can do that short story in maybe, a week or 10 days, and then I'm done for the year and I can enjoy Christmas. And I hope you guys have a great Christmas too, if you celebrate, or Happy Hanukkah or whatever holiday. It seems like everybody celebrates something this time of year. So whatever it is, I hope you guys have a great time with your families, and I will see you next time.